Welcome to the Gottesdienst crowd, where we foster confessional integrity, liturgical preservation, and preaching that doesn't stink. We believe that the historic liturgy of the divine service is more than mere cobwebs of antiquity, but it is a true treasure of the Church to be dusted off and brought down from her attic to be enjoyed. So let's get dusting.
Welcome back to the Gottesdienst crowd. This is Jason Braaten. Today we have with us Heath Curtis. He is the author of a new book, The Small Town Lutheran Church and Pastor, a concise pastoral theology for pastors and elders. So welcome back, Heath.
Always good to be with you, Jason.
Likewise. So this new book, this concise pastoral theology for pastors and elders, tell me a little bit about how you came up with this, why,
Sure.
What the definition you have in mind for small town and small church.
Yeah. So why this book and why now, frankly, is a little bit like the homiletics book. I by God's grace, have achieved 20 years in the ministry, and I'm taking that as a license to pontificate. But, you and I have known each other for almost all those 20 years. And you know what it's like to go to, we go to pastors' conferences, we meet guys. Over these past 20 years, you and I have learned so much from guys who are older than we are and experienced in the ministry. And then all of a sudden, it seems to me like it was all of a sudden, now we're the older guys. Yeah. And and it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to go to Bugenhagen, to go to, just your district pastors conference and see guys who are now a decade and a half, 2 decades younger than you are, and to chat with them. And, they'll tell a story and, you get a funny look on your face and they're like, what? And you're like, well, I know the next thing you're going to say at this point. You really stepped in it, right? And that camaraderie and brotherhood is so important to the ministry. And so like I said in the introduction to the homiletics book, I do like to write. So I've been, so I hope that that's something that I can, provide good use to my brothers in the ministry. The book is dedicated to my former field workers from CSL. We're close enough to St. Louis here in Warden that we get field workers from that seminary. And then I've also had over the years 5 different summer vicars from the Fort Wayne Seminary. So I've had good interaction with both places. And so this book is dedicated to those guys who kind of, began to cut their teeth in ministry here in Warden. And once I sat down to write this, it went really, really quickly. First, it's a pretty short book. And secondly, it's just all the stuff that, I've been talking about for, the past 5 or 6 years. I've had a lot of thoughts to share with that crowd of guys who are coming up as our colleagues now, but are a good decade younger than we are in ministry. So I just wanted to set that down because at least 60% of the parishes in the Missouri Synod are small town churches, at least. And the odds are, if you're graduating the seminary and you're going out as a sole pastor, it's like 95% chance you're going to a small town in the Missouri Synod. And so my definition of a small town is it's got to be a place that is small enough to have its own unique identity. So even though you might be in a small, you might technically be in a small municipality, if that's just part of the St. Louis blob or the Chicago blob or the Omaha or Dallas blob, that's not a small town, right? I mean, it has to have its own unique identity. And then, and it can't be so big that there's more than one school system. So if your town has 2 public high schools, that's not a small town, because a small town is a unit where, at least in potential, everybody knows everybody, or every family has that potential to interact, and that really happens at the setting of I just think it's a good, to look at your school, the size of your school system, lets you know, are we really that, unit of a small town? A small town can lose itself in the other direction, not only be absorbed in a big city, but it can kind of just melt into the background of a county if you get to the point where there are no more restaurants, the last bar closes, there's no post office. So there has to be some kind of civic togetherness, but not so big that you lose that potential. So to know everybody. So I grew up in McCook, Nebraska. At the time, a town of 8,000 people, but it's a pretty isolated place, and one public high school, and so everybody knows everybody. On the other end, I can think of several towns around here in Southern Illinois that only have 200 or 300 people, but they really do have a sense of community, and they're a place you can be from. So that's what we're talking about, and it really is. It's the vast majority of LCMS congregations.
Yeah, the school is a huge unifying factor in a small town.
Yep, for sure. And this is, a lot of guys. I also teach Greek and Latin for Wittenberg Academy, and so I know a lot of homeschool families. We've done a little bit of homeschooling with our crew as they've come through, and some hybrid stuff. And I think guys who are going through seminary and they know they want to homeschool their kids, like they're prepared now to just tell the placement office, hey man, I want to homeschool, so I don't know if a place with a Lutheran school is going to be right for me, or they've got their talking points for, how do you navigate church has a school, but I want to homeschool my kids. But I've talked to a lot of guys who are caught off guard by just going to, Podunk, Iowa. And they're like, cool, there's no Lutheran school. My church has never had a school. It's going to be cool for me to homeschool my kids. And then they run into local municipal pride. Like, What do you mean you don't want to send your kids to our school, meaning Podunk, Iowa's school? And so there is, so the Middle American public school system is, it's a big part of community identity.
I mean, this was something that I was warned of when I said that I wanted to homeschool my kids. And it was at top of mind when we got to our place because we assumed that would be the case.
Yeah.
So throughout this book, you discuss many things, but what I think we want to focus on today is, in particular, chapter 6, Worship Matters. And what's unique about the worship service, how the people think about worship in a small town, how they define conservatism, all of these sorts of things. So right off the bat, when you get to a place and you're wanting to enrich, say, their liturgy with ceremony or vestments or other such things, what are some of the pitfalls, the things to keep in mind as you move forward?
Sure. So in my discussion of how I think about small town America and small town American people and how they view themselves, I use those two characteristics. The small town people are and view themselves as competent and conservative. And by competent, I mean, in a small town, if something's going to get done, we have to do it. And so I give many examples of, one of my elders is also the town fire chief, but he drives a truck for a living, but he's also got to be the chief of the volunteer fire department. Another one of my elders is on the town board. He is the least political guy in the world, but somebody's got to be on the town board. Where we go hunting down in farther southern Illinois, the farmer that farms the ground we hunt, he's the county road commissioner. He has never, I don't know, actually, I don't even know if he graduated high school. I think he probably did, but he's never had an engineering class, but somebody's got to literally build and maintain the roads. And so small town people develop this sense of, it's a quiet competence, but we can do it. And specialization, which is a big part of, we're specialized, right? We went to school for 8 years, counting an internship, to do this job. We spend some time learning very specific skills. studying very specific topics. And, people should respect that, right? Well, yeah, they will. But it's more like they expect you to be good at being a pastor. Of course you're going to be good at being a pastor. You went to school to be a pastor. What else have you got? Right? So it's very difficult to... So when you're talking about, I want to get to a place and I want to enrich their worship life. I want to lead them deeper into the Lutheran mindset, Lutheran experience, Lutheran tradition, Lutheran culture, because all of that supports our biblical teaching. If you want to change something in a church, boy, it's a lot easier if the people really respect you. Yeah. It's going to be really, really hard to have the respect of small town people unless they see you as competent beyond your job description. So I spend some time in an earlier chapter talking about how you can build that competence, and therefore confidence with your people by letting them see you do something outside your job description, and that in some sense that should be physical. I think it should. And so, for example, right, Braaten, you're the woodworker, right? You do nice carpentry work. Man, small town people will absolutely appreciate that. But I got a father-in-law and a buddy who are theater guys. They'll respect that, right? They see you get up in front of everybody and do a community theater. Yeah, so it doesn't have to be. So I'm not talking about you better be a macho man. That's not it at all. It's rather that you would better demonstrate some competence outside your job description, because that's their life. This also goes. There's a section on the pastor's wife. Some guys feel like, man, they sure ask a lot of my wife. Well, no more than they're asking of their own wives. Right. So the guy who's got a day job, he drives a truck, but he's also the volunteer fire department chief. Well, guess who has to take care of the 2 annual dinners, fundraising dinners for the fire department? His wife. Yeah. Right. Who else is going to do it? And, So sometimes I think the pastoral ministry of, man, they expect a lot of my family, or man, we live in the fishbowl. In a small town, that is a lot more egalitarian. Actually, kind of everybody's living in a fishbowl. Everybody knows everybody's business, and everybody is all hands on deck. So that's one aspect of these people. They're competent, and the other one is they're conservative, which does not mean what some people might think it means. It does not mean they're to the right on whatever topic. Rather, it means literally they're conservative. This is kind of like that great scene in, I think it's The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, right? Where they get to the island and they're like, this is the island where dreams come true. Mm-hmm. And they're so excited. They're like, oh, this is awesome. So dreams come true here. And he said, no. Not like wishes, dreams, right? Literal dreams, anything you might dream, which is usually, terrifying or at least odd. And so it's the same thing. They're conservative. Oh, that's awesome. They're conservative. No. They like what they're used to. Yes. They're going to maintain they're going to conserve what has been given to them, good, bad, or ugly. Mm-hmm. And so when that comes to worship, now obviously we have a lot to talk about when it comes to worship. But before we kind of dive into the worship wars and the aftermath of the worship wars, I do want to talk about how so again, they like what they're used to. So you still will find in small towns more of a respect for Sunday, for example. Sunday is the Lord's Day, but times really have changed, and so and this is going to fold together with your question of how can I help the people dig more deeply into their Lutheran heritage and Lutheran worship. When I got here to Warden now, just shy of 20 years ago. And I'll be interested to hear, you in Tuscola as far as time frames, and then you grew up in the suburbs, right?
Yeah, it wasn't technically the suburbs at the time. It isn't for sure now.
Right.
But
Yeah, and
for all intents and purposes, it was.
Yeah. So the worship wars in the 70s, 80s, 90s in the suburbs, I think was really, really different from how it was in small town America. So when I got here, just shy of 20 years ago, so they still had TLH, had never used LW. And they also had, and I can see the cover, but I can't. It wasn't the other songbook, but it was another CPH product that was, more American hymns of the late 19th and early 20th century, and it was clear that they had, because I heard stories about it, that in the 90s, late 80s, early to mid 90s. They had their little worship war here, right? And like a lot of places, it was really a group of lay people in the church. They wanted to do worship that looked less Lutheran and more Baptist, because we're on the edge of they want to look like their neighbors. And it's really these lay people. They like a certain style of music, and they'd like that to be in church, and they're not even really thinking about the liturgy at all. Right. And so that was replicated all over the Synod in the 1780s and 90s. And it's, I think, very different than the experience of the suburbs, because, of course, the big selling point of contemporary worship was this is what you need to do to reach modern people today. And in the suburbs, that worked, right? I mean, over and over again, many, many different churches. Like, the new pastor comes in, he says, man, to reach these people, we have got to do contemporary worship. They did contemporary worship, and then their church did grow. And so now, whether in reality, maybe it just grew because your community was growing, and if you would have stuck to a very vibrant, active, traditional, authentically Lutheran style of worship, maybe your church would have grown just as much. But boy, you sure look like a prophet if you say, if we change X, the church will grow. And then you change X and it does grow. So that was the experience in the suburbs. But man, in small town America, the church just wasn't going to grow at all because small town America isn't growing. Right. And so it was a very different experience. And I just think it kind of petered out, the whole worship war experience kind of petered out right as LSB came out in 2006. And my congregation was a really interesting example of that. So when LSB came out, it was really, really easy to move beyond any of the worship war stuff. It was just, hey guys, there's a new hymnal. Let's use the new hymnal. Yeah. Let's really dig into this. And then in one fell swoop, TLH went away and the other songbook went away. And I've talked to guys, across the country that, it's a similar process. And so now today, if you get a call to small town America, you are very likely to find simply the norm of, hey, we use LSB. Now you're going to you'll find some local stuff, and you may even find, right, if your church's worship war experience coming out of, 1988 was, they ended up with 8:00 service out of the hymnal and 10:30 service out of the other songbook or creative communications or some blended worship, something or other. Well, guess what, Pastor? They've been doing that since 1988. Yeah. And they're really going to want to conserve that. And so that will for sure be a challenge, but it just isn't the same kind of battle that it was. I think are we in the exact same class? You graduated high school in 96?
95.
95. So, well, you're old. And
I think you're actually older than me.
You're a super genius. So they pushed you ahead in school.
Super not genius.
And so, man, in the 90s and in Nebraska, even small town Nebraska, the worship wars were pretty hot. And in small town America, at least, they've really cooled down. And it doesn't mean that you're not going to be frustrated with your conservative people, that you would like to move them in a different direction. But I think in understanding those things, and understanding that history and where they're at, I think you can have more. I think you can weave your way through the obstacles toward that. And so the first thing I actually talk about in the chapter is, I think, the most useful thing, and that is, do something. You need to add a service. No matter how small your church is, you need a service on a weekday night, not Saturday night. Saturday night services serve no one and only serve to hurt the pastor. And so, again, I did subtitle the book, some pastoral theology for pastors and boards of elders. So read through this chapter with your elders. If you've got a Saturday night service, I do my best to persuade them that Saturday night services are not a good idea, because they don't actually serve anyone with anything useful. And they simply make the pastor's life really tough. So, my family's like everybody else's family. My kids go to school Monday through Friday. Sunday for us is a work day. It's a big work day for Dad, but it's a big work day for the whole family, right? Wife teaches Sunday school. The boys are doing acolyte stuff. Other kids are singing in choir, or playing instruments in church, whatever. And just a big day. And so that leaves Saturday as the day when a pastor's family could have a family day without everybody having something else going on. Well, if you toss in, now we have a worship service Saturday night, you just really made the pastor, that's really, really hard on the pastor's family. And as I narrated earlier, we go into this line of work because we want to serve people. Pastors' families are going to make sacrifices like everybody else's family. I got no problem with sacrifices if they serve people, if they're useful. But this just is not useful, because if you can't go to church Sunday morning, you can't go Saturday night either, because it's because you're either traveling on the weekend or it's because you work weekends. That's why you can't get there Sunday morning. And so that Saturday service really is a misplace. It misplaces all the energy in your church that should be going to serving people and bringing them. I'll put it this way: it's lowering your weekly attendance. If you move that Saturday service to Monday night or Wednesday night or Thursday night, you will see your weekly attendance go up, because you'll now be able to serve people who work weekends or travel weekends. And that is modern American life. We can complain about it all we want. And if I could wave a magic wand, I would restore all the laws in our nation about every place of business is closed on Sunday, and there's no hunting on Sunday. I think both Virginia and Pennsylvania just recently got rid of that. They're the last states to not allow hunting on Sundays. All that's gone. You can complain about it all you want, but what are you going to tell your guys who work shift work, or who's a pharmacist or a doctor or a nurse, or, my dad worked in a grocery store? What are you going to tell these people? What, you can't be Christians because you have to pick a job where you get Sundays off? Really? All those people are going to have to work weekends. So we have to serve our people. Every church should have a midweek service. And if you don't have one now, that's a great opportunity to start a service that is, very faithful, traditional Lutheran service, right out of the hymnal with good ceremonies, and because it's new, it's extra, and the people aren't going to, and so there's nothing there to conserve. So you get around that, maybe the difficulties you're having in people, just want what they've always, they don't want to go out of their comfort zone at all. And so that was very helpful here in Warden. I was able to convince the elders that, hey, we need to start this thing on Wednesday because we need to serve our people. People travel, people have to work on weekends and so forth. So let's start this Wednesday night service. And then that service, we, use the chalice, and it's straight out of the hymnal, and and that was just really, really helpful not only in serving our people, but in getting better worship practices into the congregation's life.
It is a principle that Peterson often talks about, that it's easier to add something than to take it away.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah.
So tell me about this midweek service. Is it sung, spoken? Do you have any hymnody and things like that?
Right. That's another good point. In small town churches where the volunteer base and just the number of people are lower, if you want to add a full blown service every week, that's probably going to be really difficult. Unless you keep an organist at home with you, then maybe that would be a little easier. But short of that, it can be really tough. So in my congregation, that Wednesday night service is spoken divine service, no hymnody at all, no organ music at all, no chanting at all. And I will say, I also think that made me chanting on Sunday easier for the people. I really do, because probably that was the most noticeable change for them between me and my predecessors. And I was blessed to come to a place with very faithful predecessors. I didn't have to reteach the people anything on, closed communion or anything else goofy. Just good, lucky me. I just followed guys who were very faithful, several pastors back. But I really wanted to, the major restoration of ceremony to our worship. And again, we should beat this dead horse that the Gottesdienst crowd has heard a billion times. But, our confessions state that the point of ceremonies is to teach. Mm-hmm. Right? So that's why I think these things are important. They're here to teach the people. So when you elevate the host, when you kneel after each consecration, when you conduct the liturgy in a reverent manner, when it's different than anything else, that is, we sing everything, that all these things are teaching something about our worship, teaching something about our Lord. That's why we do this. That's why I care. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to do that on all that stuff on Sunday morning. But yeah, for some people, man, that was the big barrier. Just had never been to a church service that was chanted. Mm-hmm. And two things made that easier for me. One was, the new hymnal, LSB, and they could open up the hymnal and see, oh yeah, well, sure enough, there are musical notes for pastor's part. Yeah. That was a real downer and a downside of TLH. Mm-hmm. In the original printing, and the music book came out a couple years later, and that was not great. That was tough. So that made it easier. But then the other thing that made it easier was the Wednesday night service. So that if you I just need to go to church where the preacher doesn't sing, just give me a break. Well, you could go to Wednesday, and you could have. And the other thing, the other reason that Wednesday night, I think, went well for us is as a spoken divine service. Yeah, we're out of there in half an hour. And again, we can complain and we can say people should be delighted to come to the Lord's house and spend a lot of time there. Church should be 2 hours long. But it is hard for thee to kick against the pricks. And it has been huge. It's easily increased. I don't know what's increased our attendance. But I would say our attendance is probably 25% higher than it would be without that Wednesday night service. Mm-hmm. Simply because we're catching people. It gives you an opportunity if you're traveling or working, but then also it's an easy ask to say. So in another sense, you're kind of calling the modern American's bluff. Oh, Pastor, I'd love to be in church, but I got to work sometimes. Pastor, I'd love to be in church, but I really do want the kids to have the opportunity to play baseball, and the coach is always scheduling games on Sundays, and you just kind of call all those bluffs by saying, I'll meet you halfway. We got church on Wednesday night, and I'll meet you 3/4 of the way. It's only half an hour. And that's actually super effective and actually serves the people. Again, it's not ideal. Again, I would love to go to a world where Sunday was really the Lord's day. But, man, that ship has sailed.
So is this a distinct service from Sunday then, in terms of readings as well as sermon?
That's what I've always done. I don't think you have to do that. I think you could easily redo the Sunday before, and that's especially true. I think there are 3 good nights. There are probably 4 good nights, but I think there are 3 good nights to have this. You do it Monday night, in which case it's really natural to just redo Sunday, right? Up in the North Country, the North Woods, Wisconsin and Minnesota, they have a long-standing tradition of Thursday night church in the summertime. And so if you're up there, you might already have that in the summertime. It's pretty easy just to lengthen that into year-long stuff. And then, well, that's obviously designed for, we're going to be leaving town Friday to go to the lake or to go up north. And so that's pretty easy to anticipate the Sunday. But I really like Wednesday. We had no tradition of a midweek church service here. So I really thought about that. Growing up, my home congregation had Monday night, but I really wanted it to be, the advantage of Wednesday is, with it being equidistant from the weeks, you can say, hey, if you missed church on Sunday, come Wednesday night. Or, hey, if you know you're going to be out of town next weekend, come to church this Wednesday night. Yeah. So you can pre or post. And in that case, it makes a lot of sense for you to use a different set of propers. And it was also good for me. So I've always enjoyed that. I've always just used some saint day from the week. And with LSB now and that calendar, it's pretty easy to find one. Obviously, my book, which should be retired. When is the next time Scammon's going to be on for you to lacerate him about the Lutheran Missal not being printed yet?
Well, he's coming on soon, but not about the missal. But
well, while he's on, make sure you give him a good talking to, because so my Daily Divine Service book was never meant to be out for as long as it's been. But at any rate, so there are a lot of saint days in there. And when the Lutheran Missal comes out, we'll have a really, really good book. And so that's what I've always done. I really like that because it lets me explore more text. And I've always used that as my opportunity to, try new things with preaching. And specifically, from the get-go on those Wednesday nights, I've practiced extemporaneous preaching, preaching off the cuff, just, 5 to 7 minute homily, instead of 12 to 16 minute sermon on Sunday. And I really like that. I've talked to other guys about adding a service to their midweek, and they're like, man, I just don't know if I could prepare another sermon. They're like, well, no problem. Then definitely go with the Monday night thing. And then it's super easy.
Well, it would also be a perfect time to begin preaching from an outline or
exactly, or just anything different. Right, exactly. Anything different. And I will say, when you first start it, be prepared for super low numbers, especially if you're at a small church. So, our congregation is, maybe 80 people, 85 people in a week's worship, but about 20 to 25% of that now is on Wednesday night, but not at the beginning. Not at the beginning, man. There were several weeks for several years where it would be me and one old lady, me and my wife and kids. But I think if you stick with it, it really will pay off.
So say your congregation currently has a Saturday night service. Would you say add in addition and see if to bring those people over, or just over the summer swap?
Yeah, your mileage may vary, right?
Yeah.
You would really need to feel out your board of elders. And again, I hope this book will be useful to you. That this might be I think this would be a fun book to read through with your elders. And we should also say that I I've priced this book as cheap as Amazon will let you price it. I really do want this one to just be useful, and in fact, on in your review on the Gottesdienst on Gottes blog, there's a free PDF. So this is, take it, share it, have fun with it. But if you want hard copies, Amazon will not give them to you for free. So give Amazon their cut. And if you want it in hard copy, I really do think it'd be fun to read through with your elders. And maybe that could open the conversation about, hey, let's talk about serving our people better. And if they're still like, well, but this is what we've always done, people are used to this, what about the 15 people who always come on Saturday night? We don't want to make them mad. We don't want to disrupt them. I would, do the gambit of no problem. Let's just add. I'll keep doing Saturday night, but let's add one in the middle of the week and see what happens. And I think then once that's in place with a little more cajoling and encouragement, I bet you in a year or two, you could get it to migrate. And there might come, there does come a time sometimes when, pastor and elders really do have to lead. And then maybe you do just have to say, listen, we've offered these 2 services for a couple of years. We think we just need to go with the midweek service, and then you just change it. But man, that's all of that, of course, is very, very susceptible to local conditions on the ground with your relationship with your elders. Obviously, that's how our churches work, is that pastor and elders have got to be on the same page for any kind of beneficial change to happen.
Yeah.
I have a question for you, Jason.
Yeah.
What are the things that you still haven't changed, or maybe that you're even embarrassed about when pastors come to visit you in your church and they find out that the great Jason Braaten, Lord of Goddess crowd, still has blank in worship?
So I would put them in this order. We still have flags in our...
There's a list. This is good.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We still have flags in our sanctuary. This is a battle that I lose every year.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's ever changing, but it is something I still continually bring up. And we haven't really moved the ball on that. The second thing is, and this is less embarrassing, but it's not the way I'd like it. There has been a long standing practice of the entire congregation saying the collect of the day together. And for like larger gatherings, like Christmas or Easter, I'll usually say it, but every Sunday they all say it together. And I think there's like one rubric in the TLH rubrics that says that could be done. And that's probably why I haven't pushed as hard as I might otherwise. Like, well, it's part of the rubrics. I read it somewhere, kind of like we do. And then one thing that I actually started that I'm not super keen on, but I felt at the time it was like the right way to go. There was a significant desire to have another setting in use. And so for Easter, we started doing setting 1. And then a few really keen elders said, Pastor, they don't want the whole setting. They just want, this is the feast.
Sure.
So during Easter, we will take out the Gloria and put in this is the feast. So those are my...
So they had LW before LSB?
No, they didn't, but they travel enough. Sure. They travel enough that they, so we have children of pastors, previous pastors here still in the congregation. And so they're kind of spread all over the place. And as they travel, they go to other parishes and they see, hey, we did this setting. We're not familiar with it, but it was kind of nice, or we liked that, or
Yeah.
So they may have brought it in a printed form, but it was never. They only had TLH. They only did setting 3. That's really all we do, except for during Easter. We have This Is the Feast as the Gloria.
Yeah.
Those are my 3 things.
Well, I have more questions to ask you. You got individual cups?
Oh yeah, we still have those.
Okay, let's put that on the list.
But
do you chant the Lord's Prayer? Or does everybody say the Lord's Prayer in the midst of the communion liturgy?
Everyone says it.
Yeah. Okay. How do you feel about your choir selections?
We don't have a choir.
Okay. Any pre-service music ever? Anything like that? Musicians doing their thing?
Well, I mean, not really.
Okay. Yeah. No. And how do you feel about the health and wellness of your hymn selections?
Mostly good. There's some, the old favorites that are in there periodically, which are abidable.
Hey, remember, when anybody gives you guff, I only refer to TLH as the Nearer My God to Thee hymnal. Let us not forget. Let us not forget. Esvar Immerso. So your list is very, very similar to my list. And I think this is important for, again, this book is obviously, dedicated to my field workers. And, what do I have to say to any of my elders? I'm not going to pontificate to them. So I'm pontificating to younger guys. I think it's really, really important for them to hear that you and I and anybody else who's associated with Gottesdienst or anybody who's, we've been, hammering away in the trenches. Not everything is perfect at our place either. Yeah. And I'm sure you've known guys in your orbit, in your circuit or region who have kind of, run their ministry on the rocks because they didn't learn to bend, not break.
Right.
Yeah. That, what? Yeah. So I'll go down your list. We still have, the battle flag of the Republic and the Christian flag in our sanctuary. There are reasons that we're uncomfortable with that. And I think mainly it's because you and we know the history of how those got there, right?
Right.
We know that Lutheran churches never had political flags in their sanctuaries, but that it came into Missouri and Wisconsin, Synod, German churches in America. It came into our churches because of fear of persecution in World War I. I started to not feel as bad about it. Did you go to so this is a long time ago, man. This is almost 20 years ago. I think it was in 2006 or 2007 when the Synod's worship conference was up at Milwaukee area.
No, I didn't go to that.
You didn't go to that one? It's really good. And one of the things was we went on a tour of, different cool churches in Milwaukee. And they took us to an Orthodox church. It was a Serbian Orthodox church. And, all these beautiful mosaics and everything. It's like the second biggest collection of mosaics after the Cathedral Basilica in St. Louis. And so we walk in, and as you walk into the church, on the floor, in this giant mosaic on the floor, is the coat of arms of Serbia. And I'm like, I don't feel as bad about my battle flag anymore. I just come on. All right. I mean, because there is, I choose to view this as, we always pray for our nation. We want things to go well. I still have individual cups, and it's even, and I don't know about you, but like, I felt like I was making really awesome progress with the individual cups. So I spent some of the automatic goodwill you get when you first get to your place by saying, we're not going to have the plastic cups. I will buy a set of glass cups. I will even wash them if you wish. But so I just did that right away. Felt pretty good about that. And then I'm like, well, here's the plan. I'm going to start this new Wednesday service, and that'll be just the chalice because right? As you noted, it's easier to start something new. Just going to do that. Nobody has to go to church on Wednesday. It's brand new. And nobody has to take communion when they go to church. But on Wednesday, we're just going to have the chalice because, it's a new service and the elders and I are setting it up and we don't want to make it work for anybody. So all these, clever ideas okay, there we go. Aha, there we go. So, and sure enough, over the years, lots of people who were individual cup people on Sunday morning, they would come to Wednesday and they would take communion from the chalice and it was no big deal. And so I felt that was really good. And then like a lot of guys, I'm sure you do this, new confirmands, it's just not even presented to them as an option. Just we take, so I'm like making all this great so we went from when I first got here, probably 60-40 in favor of individual cups to where we were, definitely 60-40, maybe 70-30 with the chalice in favor, and then COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Complete reset, complete disaster.
Yeah. COVID for me was like starting over.
Yep.
Like in every way, like Bible class was eviscerated, and just having to build from zero. Yeah.
But I've told you to stop worrying and learn to not care about Bible class, right? I mean, surely. It's gravy. It just doesn't count. We've got a preacher from the pulpit, or it does. Bible class is just for fun. In a sung liturgy, right? The preacher's supposed to sing the Lord's Prayer, and the people are supposed to sing the response. So you guys just stop and everybody talks for that one, right?
Yes.
Okay. So bummer. Wow, Jason, horrible Lutheran past. Some Augustine's bro you are. But that is one where I got pretty serious kickback, and now I do something goofy to make up for it. So I'm like, hey, we're singing it, and we're singing it. And I did that, and had some questions at first, but then I don't know how many years in, 4 or 5 years in, maybe, I got real pushback from really good parishioners, not alligators at all, but they're just we've really missed saying the Lord's Prayer together. And at first I was, it ruffled me, as I'm sure it ruffles you, when you get criticism from the people that you expect to have your back, right? Which is ridiculous, which is just our sinful pride. So I went home and thought about that and pouted for a while. Then I'm like, you know what? Of course they're right. But I don't want to quit singing, the liturgy the way it's printed. So we just have, double Lord's Prayer every week. So so the prayers of the church every week start with, Lord, in your kingdom, Lord, remember us in your kingdom and teach us to pray. And we all pray the Lord's Prayer together at the beginning of the general prayers. So there's a tip if you want to try to get your sung Lord's Prayer in there. And then they're all happy with that. And then another thing where, you do, this goes to what I talked about before about the competence and the conservatism of the people. And just in general, the guys who obviously it's been way, way overdone in many, amongst many guys, the whole business about enculturation, right? Is that the term?
Yeah.
But there is a truth in there, and we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And the truth is, that our people do come with a culture, and that is definitely they feel that they want to express that in their music. And so the piece that I've it took us a few years between me and the choir and the choir director. I did just have to say not these pieces. Some of them were not great, not great theologically and so forth. And they still have some pieces that, man, maybe I really don't care for them in terms of their music and in terms of maybe not the most theologically profound or put together, but they're not, evil. So the choir gets to sing those. And there's some hymns in our hymnal that maybe you don't think are awesome, but that your congregation has been singing for 30 years. Well, guess what? That's what they've always been doing. They get to sing that hymn, man. And I will even say, there's some energy in our congregation. We got 4 or 5 people who are very musically talented. They want to do something. And what they want to do is very much from their culture. So I've even had, Jason, I have had as a prelude, and I try to channel the energy in the most theologically profound way. I have had Johnny Cash's "When the Man Comes Around" as a prelude sung in my church. We just try to put it, toward the end of the church year.
Yeah.
And is that super awesome and super Lutheran and super put together and tied down and super Gottesdienst? Well, I think it's awesome, actually, kind of. In many ways, maybe I've gone a little native, been here too long. I think it's kind of awesome, but it's obviously not what I would have picked from day one. I would love my people to have I would love for that to be, a Bach Dies Irae or even a Mozart Dies Irae for that day. But I do live in Southern Illinois.
Right.
And you wouldn't bat an eye to that kind of thing if you were truly called to a cross-cultural, ministry. Man, if you were at a cross-cultural ministry, you're dealing with, I don't know, Canadians or Tanzanians, and you've got LSB, but then, they want one of quote unquote their songs before the service. You get in your gut. That's cool. That's fine. So that's kind of how I feel about, I think it's important to say that when we talk about wanting to make your place better, it's still got to be your place. And it's, St. Paul talks about the church as a household, and obviously the church as a bride. And there's a sense in which all of us need to look at our wives and love them, faults and all. Yeah. And people who are really in love with each other even tend to find a way to look at the other's faults as lovable quirks. Yeah. And I have no doubt that if you were going to do the counter interview with my elders and church leaders in general and musicians, they would have a very parallel view of me and my quirks. Right? That I mean, how many people in Tuscola tolerate you chanting just because they like Pastor Braaten?
Probably most of them.
I was going to say it's definitely more than half.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. None of them love it. And maybe some of them come to appreciate it. And, but really, we're asking a lot of them, and we do need to, develop an appropriate flexibility, on these kind of things.
No, that's definitely true. I mean, you talked about culture, and I mean, at the end of the day, the culture of a place definitely has more sway than almost everything else.
Yeah.
And learning to distinguish between what must absolutely stop, and what can be abided, and what can be enriched along the way.
Yep.
That is a skill that I don't know that we talk as much about as we should. We can talk about the ideal, and we should not stop talking about those things. But there definitely has to be like when you walk in, there are certain things that you are going to have to stop, and those are the things you should stop right away, and spend your capital on it. There are other things that, it's less than ideal, but it's not bad, and it's it may be quirky to this place, and that's okay.
Absolutely. I mean, I've got buddies in the ministry. I'm sure you do too, and they've even inherited situations where they've got the full blown praise band.
Yeah.
And they don't see. I'm thinking of two guys in my mind right now in particular. and yeah, and if I was in his shoes, I would feel exactly the way he does. Just I have no idea how I would, navigate that to just go away full stop.
Mm-hmm.
And they're both being very faithful. They're doing good work. They're making they're making the service that is fully out of the hymnal, both liturgy and hymnody. They're making that really, really good. And their, the praise band is still the praise band, but they're making the rest of the service, from a Lutheran service, from a setting of the divine service. But man, I don't know. There's a great book. I was trying to think if it was on the list when I had Ollie in class. I don't think it was. There's a great book of infantry tactics. It's just fun to read, and it's called The Last 100 Yards. and it's all about how you can have all these highfalutin maneuvers and everything, but it always comes down to that last 100 yards, and that's really, really tough. And that's kind of how I feel about these brothers who kind of struggle in these situations. I don't know how you close that last 100 yards.
Yeah.
In some of these places, it'd be difficult, but again, it goes to show, similar to what I was saying about, if we only have church on Sunday morning, then doctors and nurses and people that work for grocery stores just can't be Christians, I guess, because they'll never be able to go to church. Right. And in the same way, man, I want guys like you and these buddies that I'm thinking of to serve in places that, if you and I can only go to places that are 100% perfectly Lutheran in practice, the way we want them, then where exactly will we serve?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And more than that, I want, really solid guys who really care about our church's teaching and practice. I want them to go to places that maybe have been a little weak in practice over the years. And so that's why I wanted to get your list of things that maybe you're a little embarrassed at when guys come to visit, because I have my list too. But man,
the individual cups isn't. I'm not necessarily embarrassed by it because of where it came from. They were.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have the chalice at all, and when I got here, and that was like one of the things right away. Yeah. Like, we have to have this. Like, you don't have to take from it, but it must be here. And, but slowly, I think it was just me and my family at first. And at the time that was just me and my wife.
Mm-hmm.
So,
right.
And then, but slowly it's, we're probably at the 50-50 mark to 55, 45 mark.
Yep.
And they had the plastic cups, and we went to glass, and we offered to wash them, and now some people are helping out, and so it's come a long way.
Yes. Yep. And that's probably it. That's what to say in general too. But again, with the target audience of the book, especially being younger guys, I talked to, again, I'm thinking of a couple guys that I ran into up at the Bugenhagen conference last summer, and they were just like really, bummed out and frustrated and about some of these very issues that we're talking about. And I'm just like, have you ever been to so-and-so's church? Have you ever been to my church? Have you ever been to Jason's church? Nothing is perfect, but you're being faithful. You're trying your best. And the goal, of course, is not, some artificial marker of orthodoxy. It's actually to take real Lutherans and get them better stuff.
Yeah.
And so it's not, man, I can't be like, Pastor Oxenschlager, who totally got rid of the individual cups. Man, why can't I be like him? Or why can't I do that? No, wait a minute. You're trying to take your people to a better place, to get them to give them the best possible service that you can give them in the way the Lord wants them to be served. Mm-hmm. And that's how, obviously that's how your ministry is going to be judged before the court of heaven, not on, did you get the did you get the Methodist flag out of church?
Right. So maybe kind of in closing here, could you talk a little bit about, in light of the conservative nature of the small town churches and small towns in general, the frame of mind one should have in terms of timing and length of service, that, going in to a place and thinking that you can just kind of shape it up and ship it, get it spick and span, and that it will continue that way, in 3 years. Old habits die hard. So
yeah, for sure.
What should our mindset be in terms of horizon of bringing these things in?
Yeah, it's a good question. You and I both talked about, we think we use a little different words for it, but, spending that initial goodwill, that initial cachet, that initial stack of poker chips, a lot of different analogies or terms have been used at the beginning of your ministry. You do get a few freebies because you're the new guy, because they expect a new guy to come in with energy and want to do things. And so I think the way you narrate it was exactly right, that if there's something that you think is just really, really weak practice, or maybe even just plain wrong, that has to be dealt with right away. I will give you I recently heard one, the person in district will remain unspoken, but I know of a man who arrived at a church and found out that in an effort to serve people who had alcohol intolerance of one sort or another, he walked into a congregation where they had water in the individual cups, and they were consecrating water. Mm-hmm. Well, that's not okay. And he dealt with it very well. He had great support from his district president, and it went over very smoothly, and they're doing great. Okay, so there's an example. You and I both talked about how we really were. We both, when we got to our places, spent some poker chips on the getting rid of the plastic individual cups. Not a good ceremony, sends the wrong message about what the Lord's Supper is. But then, beyond that, man, it's so much of it comes down to the relationship with the elders, the relationship with the congregation, and it is an art to figure out what changes happen up front, what changes come later. If you think, well, I'll change one thing every 6 months or something, then people get change fatigue, or you get, if you don't mention anything about something you really feel strongly about, and you're like, well, I'll wait a couple years, and then a couple years go by and you mention it, and you might find the elders saying, well, if you feel this way, why didn't you say something about it 2 years ago? Right. So, so I think this is an advertisement for go to your Winkle, go to other conferences, talk to your brothers in the ministry, and get good advice. Mm-hmm. I can't tell you how many times I've been saved heartache and trouble by asking for advice, and really sit down with your brothers and talk those things through. And then you're talking about length of service. I've been blessed to be in one place for a long time, for 19 and a half years. And that's wonderful, but there are trade-offs for everything. I absolutely dread funerals now. Funerals are never fun. Right? Someone has died. You're missing someone. But man, now these are people who are so close to my kids, so close to our family. Just that we've been through so much together that it's really hard to get through funerals these days. So that's a downside. And another thing, Walther talks about this in his pastoral theology. The Missouri Synod used to have a culture where, when a call came, you had to get the church you were serving at could kind of veto the call, right? You heard of this, that you would have to go to the voters and ask if it'd be okay if I took a call. Okay. And so he's talking about all this and about, do you take the call? Do you not take the call? And Walther mentions, hey, as part of you considering taking a call, you should consider, could an equally orthodox guy as you, but just a different guy with a different personality, different set of relationships, could he do better where you're at? So it was a really interesting way of talking about sometimes you don't mesh. Sometimes you don't click with your congregation. And actually that's okay. It is okay to put in, right, we kind of have this folk tradition, that this unwritten rule in the Missouri Synod. You have to serve how long, Jason, somewhere before you can ask to be on a call list?
3 years.
That is correct. No one knows where that's written down, but we all know it. You got to put in your 3 year. You got to put in your 36 months, and then so that's our definition of the old college try. Really, really work hard, and then it's totally legit to say, you know what? I think somebody who's just as orthodox as I am, but who's not me, could do better in this spot, and I could do better. And it would be better for my family if I were in a different spot. That's totally legit. But I don't know. I don't think there's one answer to that. I think you and I both know guys who have made a career almost like a Methodist preacher, where they really do move every 3 to 5 years. And I've known guys who've been in 5 calls who are my age. Fine. I could see where that's useful to the church. I'm really happy that we've, been here for a long time. And I definitely think that there are things that I've been able to do here only because I've been here a long time. And the longer I'm here, I also see the downside of that, to where it's like, you know what? I think this is an issue that could be better in our church, that I could see how this would be a lot easier if I left and a new guy came in. That would be easier. So I think on balance, long-ish pastorates are good on balance, but there's definitely something good about rotating your stock.
Yeah. Yeah, that does seem personality dependent.
And the personality of your congregation and board of elders, and that, all that plays into it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for taking the time to actually just put this down in one spot. There's probably a billion blog posts or podcasts about it throughout, the interwebs, but to have it in kind of one spot that you can page through, easily read, pick up at any time, and even, as you said, hand to your elders or someone else. It's a great gift to the church to have something like this. So thanks for taking the time to do that.
Yeah. I hope it's useful, and I do think at the very least, if you read it, you'll smile every now and again when you think about yourself and your parishioners, and I think your boards of elders would also get a chuckle on a few pages. But hopefully it'll be helpful for guys out there.
Well, thanks for your time again. I'll put a link to the free PDF in the show notes so that they can have access to that.
Awesome.
And as well as to the Amazon in case they want to buy the copy. But awesome. Thanks for your time, Heath.
All right. Take it easy, Jason.